Now that we know what the relationships between the angles are when we have parallel lines and a transversal going through them, we can look and see how to find missing angle measures using algebra as well. Looking at our first example, they told us that line L and line M are parallel, and then we see that we have our transversal, and we want to figure out what the relationship between the angles are, and then we can find what x is. These two angles that they gave us, one is an algebraic expression, this 5x minus 2. And if I look at the relationship that that angle has to 58, they are corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are congruent, so we're going to set those equal to each other. Once we set them equal to each other, we're going to solve for x like we normally would. So we're going to add 2 on both sides and divide by 5 to get that x equals 12. Number 2, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to first figure out that angle relationship. If we see these are on opposite sides of our transversal, so they're alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. So again, we're just going to set 6x plus 22 equal to 134 and solve like normal. When we solve, we find that x equals 7. Number 3, notice that this expression 7x minus 1, it has an arrow pointing to which angle it's looking at. So if I look at where the arrow is pointing and the 125, those are interior angles and they're on opposite sides. So these are alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles are congruent. So we're going to set these things equal to each other and solve for our x. Number 4, 9x plus 2 and 133 are on the same side of our transversal and they're interior angles, which means we have same side interior angles, which is also called our consecutive interior angles. Those angles are supplementary, so we're going to add those together and set it equal to 180 degrees. When we do that, we're going to combine our like terms, and then we're going to solve like we normally would and find that x equals 5. For example 5, we were given alternate exterior angles, again the opposite side of our transversal. Those angles are congruent. Notice this time we have two algebraic expressions. We're still going to do the same thing. We're going to set them equal to each other. It's just now we need to make sure that when we're solving, we get all of our x's to one side first. So that's going to leave us with 5x minus 77 equals 38. And then we're going to add 77 to both sides. And when we divide, we get that x equals 23. Number 6, we have corresponding angles, and they gave us algebraic expressions for both. My corresponding angles are congruent, so I'm going to set those things equal to each other, and I'm going to solve. When we solve, pay attention to those signs, and you should get that x equals 9. A couple more examples. So for example 7, we have our alternate interior angles. When I have alternate interior angles, those are congruent. So we're going to set them equal to each other. And when we do that, we solve all the way down to x equals 12. When I look at number 8, I have two angles on the same side of my transversal, and they are our consecutive exterior angles, or the same side exterior. Those angles are supplementary, so we are going to add them together and set it equal to 180. When we do that, make sure that you keep the sign in between. So it's 9x minus 33 for one part, and then 5x plus 3 for another. And then when we solve, we find that x equals 5. Those 8 examples were focusing on just finding a single variable, so finding our x. The other thing they can do with these problems is they can give us multiple algebraic expressions and have different variables. And with that, we would use one variable to find the other. If we look at example number 9, we're finding our value for x and y. Looking at the picture, we see that we have two x expressions and one y expression. So we're going to first figure out what x equals because x will help us find our y. When I see my x expression, so that 8x minus 31 and 6x minus 3, those are alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles are congruent, so we're going to set 8x minus 31 equal to 6x plus 3, and when we solve, we find that x equals 17. I'm now going to use the fact that x equals 17 to figure out what my y is. And we have two different options here. You can use the fact that 5y plus 35 and our expression 6x plus 3 are same side interior angles, or you could use the fact that 5y plus 35 and then our 8x minus 31 expression are supplementary angles. Either way, we are going to be replacing our x with 17, and then we're going to set the expression and our 5y plus 35 equal to 180. When we do that, the example here is with our same side interior angles, those consecutive interior angles. Remember, order of operations tells us that we need to simplify first. So that becomes 105 plus 5y plus 35 equals 180. And then from there we can solve. So we needed to find that x first before we could find our y. Number 10, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find our x first and then our y. If I look at my x terms, both of those are supplementary angles when I add them together. So I'm going to set them equal to 180. Once I solve for x, I find that x equals 4. And then I'm going to use that to figure out what my y is. The expression 29x minus 3 and 13y minus 17 are alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. So we're going to set those things equal to each other, and I'm going to replace my x with 4. Once we simplify and we solve, we find that y equals 10. Looking at number 11, my x terms are same side exterior or consecutive exterior, which means they are going to be added together to equal 180 because they are supplementary. Once we do that, we find that x equals 9. I have two different options for this next part. We could either use the 8x minus 10 and 13y minus 38 are supplementary angles, or we could use the fact that 18x minus 44 and 13y minus 38 are alternate exterior angles. So for this one, I'm going to use the alternate exterior angles because they are congruent. So I'm just going to set those things equal to each other. Notice that we replace the x with 9, and then that we solve for our y to get y equals 12. For number 12, I have corresponding angles for my x terms. So I'm going to set those things equal to each other, and when I solve that, I get x equals 14. I'm going to use the fact that 9x minus 2 and 10y plus 6 are supplementary angles. And when I replace my x, I'm going to substitute in 14 and then solve for our y. When we do that, we should get that y equals 5. So using those same angle properties that we learned in our last video, we were able to find the different angle measures. Sometimes they're going to ask us for the x or the y. Sometimes they'll ask us to substitute it in and find that full angle measure. So we just have to be careful of that. But with all of those, we were finding our angle measures using algebra with those parallel and transversal lines.